What's up and welcome to my final summary review of the 4-hour live stream testing the MSI Titan 18HX, an epic gaming laptop that has some crucial flaws that you definitely want to know about before you buy it. That's the truth, right? I'm always upfront. I try to always be as honest as possible. This is a review unit sent to me by MSI. There is links in the description that are affiliate links. If you find this review helpful, please use the affiliate links to help support me as a content creator. But my goal is not to sell you a laptop. My goal is to help you find a laptop that you will love. And I'm not trying to sell you a laptop that you don't need either. If you don't need a laptop, don't buy one. And this is obviously a luxury premium laptop that's very expensive. Probably the biggest con to this laptop is that it's so expensive. $53.99 for its overall retail price is just insane. It is one of the most expensive laptops. I think it is the most expensive laptop I have ever seen, ever. Period. For a retail brand new laptop. Like, not talking like yeah, you could get like 16 terabyte SSDs in some custom laptop or something. Yeah, you can do that with this laptop too. You could actually put 3 of those in here, all right? And then it would be like even crazier, more expensive. So let's talk specs. Let's talk through everything. This is a phenomenal laptop in so many ways. It's got an i9-14900HX Intel processor, RTX 4090 combined TDP up to about 270 watts, which we did see like 265 to 270-ish watts in Dead Space today. And maybe Dragon's Dogma 2. I can't remember, a couple other ones potentially. We saw it bounce around to that 260, 270 mark. 4 terabyte SSD, which is two 2 terabyte SSDs in RAID 0. Absolutely insane speeds on the SSDs, over 13,000 for read speed, over 10,000 for write speed. UHD or 4K plus 120 hertz mini LED display, which tested at over 900 nits, 902 nits. I think it's the brightest display test I think I've ever done. Over 700,000 to 1 contrast ratio, which I think is also the highest contrast ratio that I've ever tested. 128 gigs of DDR5 RAM in this laptop. Mine's clocked at 3600 mega transfers. I don't know why the sheet online says 5600. Maybe you could overclock it to that speed. I'm not sure. MSI usually does allow you to do that stuff in the BIOS though. Memory, timings, and overclocking with different RAM sticks is usually allowed by MSI. The top value comparison, I went over that in detail, but basically this has some of the most premium spec features of any 18-inch gaming laptop. You got basically the brightest laptop display that I've ever tested. Best mechanical keyboard, I think, or close to the best. I think the Alienware M18 mechanical keyboard is probably on par with this one. But really nice layout for the keyboard as well. You got nice functionality, FN lock, volume controls, full-size number pad, really great fully featured keyboard. The touchpad on this is also phenomenal. Haptic feedback, which means you can easily click it anywhere all over the deck. Most touchpads have uneven clicking. As you get lower, it like goes deeper. And then at the top, it's very shallow. And at the very top, it's impossible to click because it's too hard to click. This one, even click all the way around. I love it. And with MSI's recent tweaking with the most recent firmware, it's way better. If you get this laptop, make sure you update the firmware to the latest one because it'll make the touchpad go from a messy feeling experience to like, oh, this feels good. Oh, it clicks perfect. Oh, this is better. This is a better touchpad than probably I've ever tried on any other laptop. So huge premium feature, right? Like that is an important feature for a really expensive laptop. Plus, this is a whole glass pane all the way across. This is seamless. And in that sense, it may be a little misleading because sometimes you move your finger off the edge and you don't even realize you moved your finger past the touchpad edge when you're trying to click it and you're like, why isn't it working? And it's just because you moved it off. So you got to like kind of learn to position it in the center of the touchpad so you can stay inside the touchpad. But overall, really love the touchpad, really like the keyboard, kind of loud, clicky keys though, not your ideal for someone that likes silent typing. Let's talk some more value comparisons, right? If you want the highest end, most premium features, MSI tries to give you that in this laptop, except G-Sync. For some reason, they don't want to include G-Sync. In some games, you can barely tell or not tell at all that G-Sync is there or not. Really high-paced, fast-paced shooters, like Apex Legends. It was a great experience. I could barely tell if I was really, really looking for it that there was no G-Sync, but the frame times are pretty dang synced, except certain games. It's mainly when the FPS goes below 60. That's where the screen tearing gets way more pronounced. And if you can keep the FPS closer to over 100, the screen tearing becomes way less pronounced. So basically, if you optimize your gameplay to have high FPS, I don't think the lack of G-Sync is a deal breaker for this laptop, but why not? I want to be able to play some games at max settings, and some of those games are just not going to run over 60 FPS, especially as the laptop ages. Think 5, 10 years from now, more and more games are going to be running sub 60 FPS, even on lower settings. So I really want MSI to put G-Sync on the next MSI Titan 18HX. Probably one of the biggest cons, lack of G-Sync. Number 2, lack of advanced Optimus for when you're switching between the NVIDIA GPU and integrated GPU. Those 2 features are not total deal breakers, but it kind of sucks that you don't have them on such an expensive laptop. Why not MSI? It really should have them. Number 3, obviously, is the price. And I think for spec configs, I don't think that you should get this version of the Titan 18HX. You should probably focus on the 4090 version with the 64, or maybe if there's a 32 gig RAM version, go for that. This is kind of like you want to run a bunch of virtual environments. You want to use your laptop kind of as a server in a sense, as well as being able to use it as a gaming machine on the side. Yeah, this is great. Or maybe you're an extreme video editor and you're dealing with like 8K clips all the time. You really need 128 gigs of RAM for RAM capacity. This is one of the only laptops that can go that high. And the only laptop that's basically sold at that high of capacity out of the box. Quality control of the laptop, very rigid, very firm all the way around. Only a little bit of flex right here by the space bar, but even then it was very minimal, in my opinion. Very high build quality on this laptop. You got metal on the keyboard deck, glass on the wrist rest and touchpad, metal for the back of the laptop here, but you got plastic on the rear here, which keeps it cooler to the touch. It's not even hot now that we've done benchmarks. Normally, if it was metal, it'd be really hot. Then you got a plastic bottom. Plastic bottom means it's not going to get as hot. Overall, I do like the build quality. I think that the design could be improved, especially this rear here. Why did you add, like, I feel like these little blue strips should be RGB strips, or they should be black, or, you know, something more color neutral. You do have RGB here. You do have an RGB keyboard that is lit up and looks great. You do have an RGB touchpad that is lit up and looks amazing. So, I mean, the laptop does look good in many ways, but it's like, I feel like their design aesthetic for the Titan series needs to be improved just in general for next year. In my opinion, it should have clean, sleek lines with RGB implementation that you can turn off, and the laptop looks great with the RGB off. Turn the RGB on and it looks like an amazing gaming machine. That's the way I think it should be done. Ports on this, very good port selection. 2 Thunderbolt 4s, 1 with power delivery. I believe we have DisplayPort 2.1 support because we can get 240 hertz FPS on my 5000 by 1500 1440p monitor behind me, which I think can only be done with DisplayPort 2.1, but maybe DisplayPort 1.4 can support. I don't know. Either way, great port selection. 3 USB-A's, 2 USB-C with Thunderbolt supports, and then we have an HDMI 2.1 that's a high speed, and a full-size SD card slot. So the ports on this are about as good as you can possibly buy. And then the BIOS is one of the most customizable BIOSes. You can undervolt this guy. You can mess with all kinds of settings in there. And so if you're an advanced user, you love tweaking your laptop, you love upgrading it, this is a laptop that you can upgrade and tweak way more than a laptop like the Blade 18. Speaking of more competitors, the Scar 18 really undercuts the cost of this laptop for the same specs, but you don't get this many premium features. The Blade 18 in some ways offers different and better premium features. I think the 200 hertz 4K display on the Blade 18 is a better option, or the 300 hertz QHD is also a better option because that's also mini LED. but it's a higher refresh rate. So if you're an esports gamer, going for that is probably the best 18-inch esports gaming laptop right now. And if I had money, that's the laptop I would buy. I think a different gamer would get this one, right? A different user would buy this one instead, primarily because this is going to have higher power limits than the Blade 18. If you're talking performance, I have a Blade 18. It gives me enough performance. I'm happy with it. But if you're a power user, you want the most possible performance, this just allows the CPU to ramp to a higher TDP. And it can use a higher combined GPU, CPU, TDP in games. Those are the two main things, plus 128 gig 4 SODIMM slots, 3 SSD slots, including PCIe Gen 5 SSD support. There's a lot of reasons to go with the Titan 18HX instead of the Blade 18, but the display and the size and the design aren't one of them. Bloatware evaluation. There are a lot of different applications to control the laptop with. SteelSeries GG Engine, MSI Center, MSI True Color, Nahimic. I think there's a couple more that I can't think of off the top of my head. There's just a lot of different areas to control the laptop, and it can be a little confusing for a newer user. I really wish MSI could combine all those softwares into one cohesive software that you could control everything with. But they partnered with, SteelSeries and Nahimic and all these things to make the components and the software all work together. It's complex. It's a complex gaming laptop. Expect complex software to go with it is what I would say about that. Webcam quality was good. Very good. 8.5 out of 10. Good detail. Very good detail. And overall good color representation. Mic quality was mediocre. Speaker test. Very loud speakers, 94 decibels, one of the loudest speakers I have tested, but the bass and the mids kind of get muddled when it's all together. In-game audio was good, but spatial awareness was not amazing. Telling left and rights still wasn't very good, in my opinion, with this laptop. Color gamut was 98% of the P3 color gamut. Very good color gamut. Very good for video editing, very good for Photoshop, very good for designers or people that just want to consume content at very color saturated HDR levels. And we did HDR content on here and it was like so poppy, even though I only had it at 30% brightness. Like seriously, you're probably not going to use this laptop at 100% brightness. You're going to keep it at like 50% brightness unless you're in a really, really bright room. Then you'd up it maybe to 100%. Or outside. It would be a great laptop if you need a laptop to use outside. Fan noise was very loud, 61 to 62 decibels, or I think it was like 60 to 63 jumping around in that ballpark for fan noise. One of the loudest laptops I've tested. In auto fans with extreme performance, I think it was more like 55 decibels, which is more reasonable, and still very good performance and reasonable temps. The only issue with the temps that we saw in different games was in certain games, CPU was just getting slammed up to like in the 85 to 95 range, occasionally little thermal throttles, but we were pulling like 260 to 270 watts continuously through the laptop at that time. So still very good performance. If you want better CPU temps, just power limit the CPU a little bit. And if you undervolt it too. 8 to 64 RAM test, we got around 50,000, a little over 50,000 for read, write, copy. It's okay. I mean, we have very high RAM capacity. I'm not expecting super fast RAM in here. You might be able to do some RAM overclocking or upgrade the RAM to higher speed units. Also, latency on the RAM was good at 100 nanoseconds, so that's not a problem. Cinebench R23, a little bit disappointing because at CES 2023, I was pulling over 200 watts, I think around 220 watts at peak for Cinebench R23. And we were getting over 32,000 at that wattage pull. But today, the current BIOS caps it at 160 watts max pull, which means that we only got around 30,900 for our best run, or averaging around 30,600. Still very good CPU performance, but not an upgrade over the 13th gen Intel i9. So keep that in mind. Time Spy. With an overclock, we got over 23,000 and about 16,500 for the CPU score. Exceptionally good Time Spy score, like basically close to the best you can get on an air-cooled laptop. And that wasn't even the limits. We could have overclocked it more. Now, without the overclock, we're looking at about 22,500 or so, at least with the default overclock. Apex Legends. we're only targeting 120 FPS because it's 120 hertz refresh rate on this laptop. But Apex Legends, at times we were pushing over 200 FPS at 4K on low settings. So very, very good gaming experience. The display, very responsive, but without G-Sync, things don't look perfectly clear all the time, but plenty clear enough for me to dominate in the match I was playing in. So from an esports perspective, this laptop is perfectly capable of playing esports. No problem. Very, it's a good experience, but I definitely can tell a difference between 120 hertz and 240 hertz, right? Like, it's not night and day. You can still aim really good at 120 hertz, but you can aim just a little bit better at 240 hertz or say 360 hertz or 480 hertz. So there's definitely little incremental improvements, but I would say going from 60 to 120 is like a 70% improvement. Going from 120 to 240 is like a 15% improvement. And then going from 240 to 360 is like 5% improvement. From 360 to 480 is like 2% improvement, 3% improvement. It's so not hardly noticeable. That's coming from someone that is an esports fanatic. Like, I played thousands and thousands of hours of esports games. Baldur's Gate 3, 155 FPS at 4K ultra settings, phenomenal gameplay. Cyberpunk 2077, we struggled to hit playable frame rates with ray tracing and all the settings on ultra with DLSS on quality. With plenty of tweaking, lowering stuff, turning off ray tracing, you can definitely get playable frame rates in Cyberpunk 2077, but it's going to take a lot of tweaking. And that's not the only game that's going to take a lot of tweaking to get playable frames, especially without G-Sync. That's the thing. Like, when you're pulling sub 60 FPS in the latest titles, G-Sync can just make a night and day difference with how good the game feels. And that's what you're going to run into a lot with 4K 16:10 aspect ratio, because it's such a high resolution. Expect to tweak all of these games if you want to have a good gaming experience to get around the lack of G-Sync, because you really want to be pushing close to 100 frames per second to have the ideal gaming experience in a lot of games. Some games still draw in very evenly, even without G-Sync. It just really depends on the game. Dragon's Dogma 2, I think we were about 63 FPS in the 60s. In most of the game, in the city at least. Out in the wilderness, we were pushing 80 to 90. This was with ultra ray tracing on, DLSS on quality at 4K. So, I mean, you could definitely bump some settings down and push the FPS probably closer to 100, if not over 100 in most of the game area. Dead Space, we were doing, what were we doing? I think in 75 range, but very good 1% lows. Over 50 for 1% lows in Dead Space is rare, because Dead Space usually drops the 1% lows into the 28 to 35 range. So over 50, phenomenal Dead Space performance, excellent gameplay. God of War on ultra settings, turning off ultra, brought us up over to 100, I believe, over 100. Excellent gameplay experience in God of War. Helldivers 2, excellent gameplay. Over 80 FPS at 4K is phenomenal. Ultra settings is very good, right? It felt good to play. I didn't really notice any screen tearing much in the gameplay. Like, third person, a little bit slower pace than a first person game. It felt great. No problems there. Illuvium, we had initial issues getting the resolution to be correct, but after that, it felt super smooth, except for when game assets initially loaded in. Once everything's loaded in, man, it was a great experience, even at 4K on epic settings. Hogwarts Legacy, phenomenal gameplay. I mean, we did not quite the ideal FPS target, because it was like, I think 66 FPS at 4K with frame gen. If we had no frame gen involved there and we had G-Sync, it would still be playable and a good experience. But without G-Sync, I'm like, okay, we need to up the frame rate up higher. So instead, I would like turn off ray tracing, probably drop DLSS to balance, and then we were getting closer to like 115 FPS. And then it's like, okay, you don't really feel the need to have G-Sync as much at that point. Witcher 3 is, we had around 65 to 75 FPS range on ultra with ray tracing, and it was okay experience, but that's with frame gen. So turning off ray tracing boosted our FPS once again to about 90 FPS, and then it was a great gaming experience. I do think it makes a bigger difference in The Witcher 3 for some reason than Helldivers 2, for example. Even though they're both getting around that 90-ish FPS, I don't know if it's the way the game engine renders things in certain games, screen tearing just becomes more apparent. So really depends on, are you willing to tweak the settings with this laptop to get the right level of performance to where G-Sync is not as big of a deal. It's hard for me to imagine why MSI is selling a $5,400 laptop without G-Sync. Like, MSI is, as far as I know, the only laptop manufacturer that has not incorporated Advanced Optimus and G-Sync across the board. And if this was a QHD gaming laptop, I think G-Sync is not quite as important, especially if it's a 240 hertz, because the opportunity for screen tears is way less. And the primary reason for that is that when you look around, if it's 45 FPS, if you look quickly, the difference is going to be like big swaths of the screen will be screen teared. But if you're looking at over 100 FPS, the amount of screen tear difference is much smaller and much less noticeable. I think that's fundamentally why it's harder to notice the screen tearing at higher FPSs. There's so much you can tweak between the BIOS, undervolting, overclocking, the colors on the RGB, the touchpad, the different software on the laptop. Could be confusing for a newer person who wants a more casual experience. So I would say the Titan 18HX is geared towards the advanced user, has a lot of money, and probably who's going to use an external monitor for their hardcore gaming. Is this the best laptop of 2024? No, I don't think so. But I think this laptop caters to a specific individual who wants a mechanical keyboard, loves the idea of a haptic trackpad, loves the overall design aesthetic of the Titan 18HX, because this is not my ideal design. This tail end is not for me. But maybe it's for you. You know, I do tend to love blue, but I just think they should have done RGB instead of blue lines on the back or something to make it more premium feeling and cooler looking. And I want to see them improve. So the key things I want for 2025, Titan, RGB implemented on the back. Boom. I want G-Sync on the display. I want Advanced Optimus for battery switching. I'd love to see the arrow keys drop down, just a little bit of spacing right there. And I would love to see more of the software integrated into one spot. If they could do the RGB lighting, the sound control, the fan profiles, all within MSI Center, and you don't need the HEMIC, you don't need the SteelSeries GG engine, that would be amazing. In general, if I were to rank the 18-inch laptops, I would say in terms of value for your money among the 4090 laptops, the Scar 18 is up there among the very best because it costs a lot less than the Blade 18 Titan. The most premium laptop for 2024, I'd say, is going to be the Blade 18. It's got Thunderbolt 5. It's got a higher refresh rate display. It has G-Sync. It has Advanced Optimus. It has better speakers than the Titan. And then because it has Thunderbolt 5, I would say the ports are a little bit better on the Blade 18 as well. But in terms of like maximum power throughput, user customizable control, the Titan 18HX is probably the best in those categories. And the fact that it has a mechanical keyboard, haptic touchpad, those are some premium features. Windows Hello, a nice webcam, pretty dang good speakers. It still can be a compelling purchase for users out there. I think there's a lot of people who could be really happy with this laptop, but it's not my number one recommended 18-inch laptop for 2024. I'll see you guys in the next one. Brandon out.